What are you doing with your life? So many of us fall into the same routines day after day, and then we wonder why we feel flat, stuck, or like something is missing. But no wonder, because that's just going through the motions. It's not living, it's existing. If you want things to change, then you need to change things, and that's what we're going to start doing today. So let's talk about how to stop existing and start living. Hello, I'm Jeremy Godwin, and this is the Let's Talk About Mental Health podcast, full of practical advice for better mental health. If it's ever felt like you're just going through the motions, or like the world is just one big mess after the other, then you probably know what I mean when I talk about existing rather than truly living. A lot of the time, when we feel disconnected from our lives, we assume that the answer is that we need to work harder, or be more grateful, or get more motivated, or somehow just snap out of it. But usually that's not the real issue. Usually what's going on is that life has slowly become all about coping, managing, surviving, and just getting through the day, or the week, or the month. And then when that happens, your world can start to shrink without you even realizing it. You still do what needs to be done. You get up, go to work, pay the bills, make dinner, do the laundry, feed the cat, and keep the whole show on the road. But underneath all of that, something can start to feel a bit flat, a bit empty, a bit like you're present in your life physically, but not really in it emotionally. And over time, that can take a real toll on your mental health. Because human beings are not meant to just indefinitely endure life. We need meaning. We need connection. We need some sense that our life actually belongs to us. And we need to live. So in this episode, I want to talk about what it really means when you feel like you're just existing instead of living, why it happens, what it does to your mental health, and most importantly, how to start participating in your life again in ways that are realistic, practical, and actually doable. So let's start by discussing what all of this actually means, and let's talk about what is existing versus living. When I talk about just existing instead of living, what I mean is being physically present in your life, but not really engaged with it. You're doing what needs to be done. You're getting through the day. You're meeting your responsibilities, keeping things going, and functioning on the surface. But underneath all of that, there's not much sense of aliveness, not much real connection. Not much intention or interest or even pleasure. Life starts to feel less like something that you're actively part of and more like something that you're just managing. And for a lot of people, this can feel really confusing because, it's not like it always looks big and dramatic from the outside. You might still be productive and reliable. You might still be the person that everyone else thinks is coping perfectly well. But deep down inside, it feels like you're just going through the motions. You can feel flat, disconnected, restless, numb, bored, trapped, or like something important has quietly gone missing. It can feel like every day is a repeat of the one before. Like you're on autopilot. Like you're technically here, but not really in your life. Now, what a lot of us tend to misunderstand is that we assume that it means that we're being lazy or unmotivated, or that we're selfish or ungrateful or just bad at life. But usually, that's not what this is at all. More often than not, it's a sign that you've been in coping mode for far too long. Maybe life has been hard. Maybe you've been under pressure for a long time. Maybe there's been constant nonsense and shenanigans and chaos going on in the world. Maybe you've had to focus so much on survival or responsibility or just getting through things that you somewhere slowly stopped making room for joy, curiosity, choice, or anything that feels like you. So, this is not about blaming yourself for somehow becoming stuck. It's about recognizing that when survival becomes your default, that's when active participation in your life often gets pushed aside. And that's the deeper point here. This is not just about being busy, and it's not just about feeling a bit bored with things. It's about the quiet shift that happens when your life becomes more and more about maintenance and getting through things, and less about meaning and feeling fulfilled. It's about losing touch with you, with your own sense of agency, your own ability to create a life that feels right for you. It's about no longer asking yourself what you want or need or value or care about, because you've just become so focused on simply keeping everything and everyone afloat and keeping your head above water. And once that becomes your normal, it can start to feel like this is just how life is supposed to be. But it isn't. And when you stop participating fully in your life, your mental health usually starts to bear the impact. So now let's talk about why just existing harms your mental health. So when you stop actively shaping and constructing your life, or when you just allow yourself to go through the motions, it doesn't only affect how your days look and feel. It affects how you feel about yourself, about your future, and about your place in the world. In other words, it affects your entire life. Because when life becomes all about just getting through it, your emotional world tends to narrow as well. There's a lot less room for joy, less room for hope, for curiosity, for the parts of you that need expression and connection and meaning. And after a while, that can start to feel really heavy in ways that are hard to even put into words. It's not always obvious, it's not always big and loud, it's often just a slow and quiet process of eating away at your sense of aliveness. And this is where I want to be really, really clear. The problem here is not that you're failing at life or that you've done something wrong. The problem is that you may have adapted so well to things like pressure, stress, disappointment, or emotional exhaustion that you no longer realize just how disconnected from yourself you've become. And that's the fundamental truth here. Just because you're functioning, that doesn't mean that you're okay. It doesn't mean that you're thriving. You can be highly capable, highly responsible, and still be deeply checked out of your own life. I know, I've been there in the past. Now that I'm doing the work that I do, I feel very differently. But the thing is that when that happens, it negatively affects your mental health, because human beings need so much more than just routine and responsibility. We need a sense of agency. We need moments that feel real. We need some connection to what matters to us, to what makes us feel alive, to what gives us meaning, and to who we actually are underneath all of the roles that we play. When those things go missing, the mind and the body often respond with feelings like flatness, irritability, emptiness, restlessness, or that vague but persistent feeling that something's off, something's not quite right. And a lot of the time, you can end up misinterpreting that feeling as, oh, I need to try harder, or maybe I'm a bit depressed, when the real issue might be that you need to reconnect with your life. And that's the message here. This is often not about motivation. This is about participation. It's not that you don't care. It's that somewhere along the way, life became something that you manage instead of something you inhabit. And that shift often happens for really understandable reasons. Fear can do it. Burnout, grief, family commitment, repeated disappointment. So can things like trauma, overload, excessive responsibilities, or just simply being stuck for too long in patterns that are all about maintenance and self-protection. When your system learns that safety matters more than possibility, more than your identity, your world can start to shrink. You stop reaching for things. You stop hoping too much. You stop asking for much. You stop trying new things. And all of that can feel safer in the short term. But in the long term, it can leave you feeling half alive. And honestly, it's one of the reasons why I'm covering this topic, because I think a lot of us are not necessarily falling apart in obvious ways. We're just quietly disappearing inside our own routines, right? We're there, but we're not fully there. We're coping, but we're not connected. And when that goes on for too long, it can start to feel normal, even though it's doing real damage to your peace of mind, your sense of self, and your overall quality of life. Functioning isn't the same as living. So the question is, what do you do about all of that? And that's exactly what we're going to get into right after this quick break. And welcome back. So now let's get into the how-to part of today's episode, and let's talk about how to stop existing and start living. All right, so we're going to talk through practical and realistic ways to start participating in your life a lot more so that you can start really living. Don't worry, I'm not about to tell you to go and do skydiving or bungee jumping if that's not your thing. All the advice I share can be found in the episode transcript on my website at ltamh.com/episodes, and it's linked in the description. So, the first thing to focus on is be real with yourself. If life has started to feel like something you're just getting through or maybe barely getting through, then the answer here is not to judge yourself harshly for that or to beat yourself up. The answer is to be really honest with yourself about where you are now and where you've checked out, so that you can start finding your way back to your true self or discovering your new self. Maybe you've stopped choosing, reaching, planning things to look forward to, saying what you really think, or doing little things that make you feel like yourself. Ask yourself, where have I checked out? Is it in my routines, my relationships, my own needs, my hopes, my boundaries, my joy? Don't judge yourself for the answer. Just notice it. Because if you don't acknowledge it, then you can't do anything about it. You can't change what has or hasn't happened, but you can change what you do from here. However, you can't change what you won't acknowledge. So being honest with yourself is an important part of starting your journey towards existing less and living more. Please don't just sit and wait for some magical moment when you're going to suddenly feel motivated or healed or inspired or sorted out and all ready to live differently, right? Because that moment will probably never come unless you create it. And if you keep waiting for that feeling first, you can end up staying stuck in the same loop for a really long time. So stop treating your sense of disconnection as though it's just a mood that's going to eventually pass on its own. Sometimes it will ease with time, but more often than not, it lingers because your life's become too narrow or repetitive or full of responsibility or too disconnected from what actually matters to you. So be honest with yourself. If you know that something feels off, stop minimizing it. Don't brush it aside with "I'm tired" or "it's just life," if deep down you know it's more than that. Naming the truth is not being dramatic. It's the beginning of change. Be aware that sometimes the shift begins because you choose to do something different before you feel fully ready. Not recklessly and not with massive pressure on yourself, but with intention. Because nothing changes if nothing changes. Next, look at what you're feeding every day. Because whether you realize it or not, you're always reinforcing something through the choices you make. So even if we're maybe not aware of what we're doing or not doing, that's still the case, right? So are you feeding numbness by staying constantly distracted? Are you feeding flatness by giving all your energy to your obligations and none to yourself? Are you feeding disconnection by moving through each day on autopilot with no moment to just pause and reflect, and also with nothing to look forward to? This is where that earlier piece matters about being real with yourself. Start there by considering where your choices might be feeding the things that you identified. Not with judgment, but with clarity and honesty. Next, pick one small thing to focus on. Once you can see where things in your life are more existing rather than living, choose one small point of re-entry to focus on. Not 10, one. Because overwhelmed people do not need a giant reinvention project. What you need is one clear and simple doorway back into your life. So maybe that means reaching out to someone instead of isolating. Maybe it's going somewhere different on the weekend instead of just doing the same default routine. Maybe it's cooking something properly instead of just eating whatever's fastest or easiest. Maybe it's getting back into music or reading or writing or walking. Maybe it's making plans or saying no or saying yes or journaling or resting properly or finally admitting that a certain part of your life is not working. Maybe it's finding a counselor or therapist so that you can work through things. The specific action that you choose matters less here than the principle underneath it, which is this. Do something that shifts you from passive to active. Take control. This is about actively creating your life and actively living your life. Next, don't confuse participation with productivity. Participating in your life isn't about squeezing more into your calendar or becoming some hyper-optimized version of yourself. It's about being more deliberately present in what matters and making more conscious choices and allowing more room for things that create meaning, connection, relief, or joy. Sometimes participating looks active and energizing, and sometimes it looks like resting on purpose instead of collapsing by default. Sometimes it looks like setting a boundary and sticking to it. Sometimes it looks like letting yourself want more than just mere survival. You'll find it really helpful here to identify what matters most to you, and I talked about how to focus on what really matters back in episode 306, so check that out after this one. It's linked in the description. Next, stop delaying your life until tomorrow. Further to the point I made earlier about not waiting for some sort of magic fix, I also want to strongly encourage you to stop putting off your life until some arbitrary date in the future or when some goal has been achieved, right? You know, those thoughts that we have, I'll have more time next month, or I'll do it when I've lost weight. They may sound like goal setting, but all it does is to delay your life. Stop treating your own needs, wants, and inner life like they're optional extras that you'll get to later, because later has a habit of turning into months or years or never arriving at all. And when you constantly put yourself at the bottom of your priority list, that's when life can start to feel like one endless cycle of maintenance. Work, bills, chores, emails, obligations, repeat. Of course, that is going to affect your mental health. Of course, you then start feeling flat. Of course, it feels like you're just going through the motions. You're not a machine, and your life is not supposed to be one long admin task with just a few crumbs of joy scattered around the edges for decoration. So this week, I want you to do something very simple. Just choose one thing that makes you feel more like yourself and schedule it properly. Not vaguely, properly. Put it in your calendar, protect the time, and follow through on it. It doesn't need to be anything big or expensive or life-changing. It just needs to be real. Because one of the ways that you start rebuilding a fuller life is by showing yourself through action that your life matters, which it does. Now, if you want, you can even think of this in 3 buckets. So first, what do I need to do less of because it keeps me shut down? Second, what do I need more of because it helps me to feel present, connected, or alive? And then third, what have I been postponing that actually matters to me? That gives you something really simple, straightforward, and practical to work with instead of just sitting here thinking, yes, but how do I actually do all of that, right? And it's also going to help you to move from this sense of vague dissatisfaction with your life into specific choice and a feeling of empowerment, but real empowerment, not just the buzzword version or the icky social media kind where it's all just for show, right? We want real stuff. All right, next, be present and be intentional. Building a life that feels like yours means taking a lot more care with what you choose to allow into it, what you keep giving your time to, what you want more of, and what you're no longer willing to settle for. It also means being realistic. You may not be able to change your job tomorrow or leave a difficult situation overnight or instantly fix everything that feels flat or stuck, but you can start changing your relationship with your life right now. And you can absolutely start taking small steps today to create those bigger outcomes that you want or need. You can start showing up differently. You can start focusing on solutions rather than problems. And you can start making small decisions that say, I am in this. I matter here. My life is not just something that's happening to me. That's where being present and intentional supports all of this stuff without being the whole story or some sort of magic cure. Being present helps you to notice your life as it is. Being intentional helps you to choose what you want to do with it. But active participation is the turning point, because that's where you stop being a bystander in your own existence. And if you want to go deeper into those ideas, episode 287 is about being more present, and episode 218 is the one on being intentional. But for now, the key thing here is this. Stop waiting for your life to start feeling different on its own and start taking part in it. Start creating it, because there's a cost to staying the same. If you keep drifting, keep postponing, keep numbing out, keep treating your real life like it begins later, then later can arrive with nothing having changed except the amount of time that has passed. And we do not have unlimited time. I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm saying it because it's true. None of us will live for forever, and life usually does not become fuller by accident. More often than not, it becomes fuller because you decide to engage with it differently. So be honest with yourself. What needs to stop? What needs to be practiced? And what needs to be built? Keep it simple, keep it real, and start where you are. But start. So here's what I want you to take away from this episode. If life has been feeling flat or repetitive or like something that you're just getting through, then maybe you've been in coping mode for so long that you've lost some connection with your own life. And the way forward is not to put more pressure on yourself. It's to start participating again, one intentional choice at a time. So here's a question for you to reflect on. Where in your life do you most need to stop going through the motions and start showing up more fully? Because when you boil it all down, your life will not feel more meaningful unless you begin treating it like something you're actively part of. Each week I like to finish up by sharing a quote about the topic, and I encourage you to take a few moments to really reflect on it and consider what it means to you. This week's quote is by the late poet, writer, and activist Maya Angelou, and it is, "If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude." Let me repeat that. If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. All right, that's it for this week. If you found this helpful, please share it with someone who might need to hear it, and leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast platform because it helps more people discover the show and the advice I share. And if you'd like to support my work, you can find out more about my Patreon at ltamh.com. It's linked in the description below. Thank you very much for joining me today. Look after yourself and make a conscious effort to share positivity and kindness out into the world, because you get back what you put out. Take care and talk to you next time. Join me next week when I talk about navigating breakups, and check out my episode on focusing on what matters next. It's linked in the description. I release new episodes every Sunday, so follow or subscribe to never miss an episode. Let's Talk About Mental Health is an independent program. Discover more at ltamh.com.